Welcome to Simon's Living Room. And for all those of you who received the link this morning while I was having my coffee, Google decided to be strange, and you may be in a blank, empty room. But do not worry. You can watch this after the fact. I will make sure by sending you all a link to watch it after the fact. But welcome to my guest this week, all the way from Tokyo. And fully fed and watered and ready to go. It's Katheryn Gronauer. Welcome, Katheryn.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Katheryn. I'm based in Tokyo over here. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Okay. Now, Katheryn is a wellness and transition coach. And let's just start by asking what that means.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I actually started off as a health coach about 3 years ago, and I really wanted to help people with health. So I learned so much about health and wellness when I was in Japan, and well, still am in Japan. And I actually wrote a book about it. It's called Confessions of a Yo-Yo Dieter. And in the process of helping people locally with their health, I found out that people didn't even know how to shop in a grocery store for food. And so I was like, oh no, this isn't good. I need to start with just the foundational basics. So first of all, shop for your groceries, and then, build your confidence around just day-to-day living in Japan. And then from that, if people want to take that one step further, be it talk about, their purpose in Japan, and, if they need more support emotionally, that's fine. If they want to learn more about health and diet and wellness, that's fine. So I basically combine the two. So I help expats who are new to Japan with their day-to-day living. So that's the transition part and the adaptation. And I also help with health and wellness. So transition and wellness.
Ah, right. So, I mean, they come to Japan having, experienced sort of Western food, and then all of a sudden they hit Japan, and I'm going to have tonkatsu. I'm going to have, and all of a sudden they start going.
I know, right? I would say I meet there's different types of people I meet. So some people come and they're like, Katheryn, I've been losing weight. I don't know why. I want to know what this, Japan, the food in Japan is supposed to be the best in the world, and, they're to be really healthy. And they have the Japanese teishokus, which are really well balanced. And so people want to learn more about that. But I also meet people who are like, what are you talking about? There's only white rice and white noodles. Everything's refined. I've only been going to izakayas and having fried chicken karaage and alcohol. So I don't know why people are thinking this is healthy, but this is totally not healthy. So they need help. But on top of that, I've also been having just people who are new to Japan, and they're so used to having just a Western style diet, and they're finding that it's really expensive trying to purchase any kind of dairy products or nuts or
fruit.
Fruits and vegetables are really expensive. People are really used to reading in English about the keto diet is the new thing right now, paleo, veganism, and those things are really hard and challenging to do in Japan. And so they're kind of like, how should I get healthy based on their own cultural values? So it's really easy to get healthy in Japan if you know about how Japanese people think about health, but that information is not really available in English. So a lot of people come here and it's like trying to rethink their diet and their financial budget around their diet. It's a big topic that I guess hasn't really been talked about that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something. I mean, I've been to Japan now for 4 times, and I've lived out for konbinis, to be honest. But I mean, for 2 weeks 2 or 3 weeks at a time, that's okay. But I mean, if I was to move there, I would not live very long.
That's exactly how it is. I think when people first move, they're just kind of overwhelmed with just trying to get used to living. So from the get-go, they're just eating out of convenience stores or eating just packaged meals from supermarkets because they can't even read anything or know what they're buying anyway. Then they start to get settled. Then they start realizing, okay, I'm not on vacation anymore. Maybe I should start cooking for myself. But then they're not really sure what they're purchasing. Even milk, even if you're trying to make your own, pasta and milk products and those types of things, like knowing if you're buying regular milk or, low-fat milk, people don't really know what they're getting. Maybe they want to get better quality items. So you're purchasing cheese at stores, but it's just really overly processed. So where can they buy good quality, European cheeses that are imported?
This leads me nicely onto that to the question. You give workshops, obviously, for people about this, about the transitioning and where to do this. Now, I'm jumping around the questions here, but so how do those workshops work? Because I mean, I have just as you're saying there for the milk and knowing whether it's low fat or whatever. I've got visions of you holding a flag and being followed by a group of gaijins around a supermarket, and you're explaining the content.
I need a big microphone. Be like, okay, everybody. Come on, gather in the group. Come on, chop. We got to get through here. So that's a good question. I actually I'm surprised at how popular these have been. I was just trialing it. I said, okay, let me just tell people I have a grocery store tour and see how it goes. And I'm just been amazed at how many people need help with this, because I didn't think, here I am, I wanted to help people with the Japanese mentality around health. And I didn't realize how much help they needed with just going to the grocery store. So I have a food guide that I'll show you. So this is my kind of starters guide. And it shows everything from, for example, the different places where people can actually purchase food. So just other than a Japanese grocery store, we have different markets. I also talk about things like dining in Japan. So the different kinds of restaurants you can go to and what to expect in terms of the menus and, what kind of food are you actually getting, which I think is interesting. Most people come to Japan, they have their preconceived notions of what Japanese food is. So, I'll have an American will come here and they'll be like, okay, where are the crab rolls and the, California rolls and can I get that with brown rice instead of white rice? I'm like, no, we don't do substitutions here. Or I had one guy actually, he wanted to go to the best of the best Japanese sushi restaurants. So he's like, Katheryn, book me at a 3-star Michelin sushi place. And I was like, okay. It's like, oh, by the way, my wife, she's pregnant, so she can't have any raw fish, and I'm allergic to shellfish. So can you tell that to the restaurant? And I'm like, you're allergic to shellfish and your wife can't even have any raw fish? Why do you want to go to the sushi restaurant? I was so confused. But I used to work at a credit card concierge. So I was getting lots of questions from travelers who are coming to Japan. And I got asked this question quite a bit of times, probably a good 40 times, about people who couldn't eat fish or seafood, but wanted to go to a fish and seafood restaurant. And I was really confused. And I realized, well, if you're coming from the United States, most people think of Japanese restaurants as an all-in-one shop. So you go to one menu and you get sushi, you get tempura, you get katsu, everything. So you can sit at the sushi counter and you can order anything that you want. You can get substitutions. But here they don't do that. Everything's simple. No. Yeah, so if you go to a sushi place, you only get sushi.
Even kaiten sushi, it's
I know, yeah.
It's just fish.
So, just teaching people a little bit about dining culture so they know. Also, just basic Japanese products. So if people want to get started with Japanese cooking, they know just the standard household products. A little bit about things like the food labels, so people can't read food labels. So
that's the important thing. So you actually go round. I wasn't making that up. I mean, I was making that up. But
I spent about an hour with them just talking about what to expect in Japan. And if you're looking for something that you can't get in a Japanese grocery store, where are other locations you can get your peanut butter and those types of things. And then I actually spend an hour going to the store, and people are picking up things and they're saying what is this? And I tell them,
so seriously, actually going around with them. Yeah,
really what it is. I found that was really hard though in the beginning, because people would pick things up and they're like, what is this? But I'm like, if you haven't seen it in a meal, if you haven't eaten it, if you haven't experienced it, it's really hard to explain what it is. So I kind of reverse engineer it. So right now it's winter time. It's very cold here. So people are really into the hot pot nabes. So I just say, okay, this is a hot pot. This is what you're going to see when you're in a restaurant. So these are the food items that are going into a hot pot. So when we're going around the store, they can actually identify those things. Yeah, exactly. And then I'll be doing a kind of a continuing education course. So in springtime, all of the spring produce will be changing. So they can come do kind of a taste testing meal, catered meal.
Good planning there. Good planning.
Yeah, exactly.
Business planning. My business planning.
Yeah, exactly. Know what it is. Yeah, exactly. So we're not doing the food tour anymore, but they kind of need an update. So
One of our commenters, Vids of Your Mom. That's his channel name, by the way. That's his. I have no idea what his real name. Vids of Your Mom says he's looking for milk and butter was hard in Japan. Luckily, the guy at the grocery store I was shopping at had lived in the USA for 40 years. That's handy.
That's great. That's perfect. I know so many of the butters too. I mean, there's a lot of margarine. Margarine is very popular here. So just getting like the standard butter is kind of challenging if you can't read the packaging. So yeah, I agree with that.
So I mean, let's go to the questions. Back to the question now. Now talking about differences. You mentioned about American people coming and not quite figuring out that a sushi bar, it doesn't serve everything. But you've lived now for nearly 10 years in Japan, and I was watching your interview with Zach, and you mentioned that you sometimes feel kind of like a reverse culture shock when you go back to the States. Absolutely. Can you pin down exactly what no longer feels comfortable for you there?
It's interesting. Like when I'm living here in Japan, I feel like a foreigner. In terms of like mentality and just going around and people look at me, they don't necessarily think I'm Japanese. I am half Japanese, by the way.
That's right. Yeah. I'll get on to that later.
Yeah. But when I'm back at the States, I feel the thing that I notice immediately is I feel like the energy of people is just really in my personal space, I guess. Even if they're just talking to me, they just say, "Hi, how are you?" I feel like they're in my zone. So I immediately kind of feel stiff when I'm looking around.
Is that something that you've developed since living in Japan, or is it something or you didn't have that before you
I didn't have that before. I think it's just because people are, I mean, the system and the way you talk to people, they have their formalities socially. So, you could meet a stranger and they have a standard way of talking. But when I'm in the States, I kind of feel like that barrier has been crossed. So it's not really that I don't like the American way. It's just that I haven't been used to it for a while. So I definitely notice it. I feel like people are in my space, I guess you could say. Also, people are very open with talking about, or being very frank, talking about their personal lives, that type of thing, like in the span of the first few minutes of meeting them.
There's no hone and tatemai in America.
There's no like, I mean, it's very uncensored. So I feel very shocked. Like, oh my gosh, they've told me that their grandfather is dying of cancer and like all these things, like within 3 minutes of knowing them. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But, that used to be normal, like, just talking to people and being friendly at, anywhere you would go. But yeah, I feel like I've kind of gotten used to the more Japanese way. And I just didn't really notice it until I traveled back to the States. Or when I do.
Vids of Your Mom has a cultural reference here. So I love that people in Japan don't look at you. They just glance secretly. Here I go to Walmart and some men eye me down like they're going to stab me.
Yeah. Or ask you out. I don't know which one. Ask you out or stab you. It could be either. I don't know. It's a very direct way of looking at
you. I like the reserved nature when I'm in Japan. I mean, like you say, they're not in your face. But on the other hand, it's difficult to read situation. It's difficult to know, where you are, where you stand.
Sometimes you have to read in between the lines. You have to read the air.
That's doubly difficult for me. I mean, I have probably sort of fouled the air in Japan too many times.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I have too as well. But I definitely have. There's been moments where I'm like, did I say that the right way? I'm not really sure. But I can read the air a lot better. But I think sometimes you're just not really sure.
So you sort of entered Japan in 2009, was it? 2009?
Correct, 2009. So
right. That's to live. Yeah, I mean, off to come and stay. And that was to study originally. And I heard that was a whim. But I also heard that it was largely down to your mother, who chose your university for you.
So how that happened was I went to boarding school in Connecticut. And I really didn't like it. The school was fine, but I really didn't like living in the middle of nowhere where it was really dark and cold. I'm from Florida. So coming from a very hot, sunny location to living away from home and being in just like the middle of nowhere where it was cold and dark and dreary. And I just really couldn't handle it. And so my family, we were doing this college campus tour of Yale, because Yale was pretty close to where my school was. And I was like, I cannot look at another Gothic building. I can't be in the cold and dark. I'm like, I don't care. I just can't do this. Like, I have to be in a city. I have to be like where it's, no matter what the weather is, I can go talk to people and do my own thing and like do things. Like, I don't want my life to be like, run by the weather. And so my parents were like, Katheryn, but it's Yale. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care if it's Yale. I don't care if it's Harvard. I just don't want to look at this Gothic building. And so, yeah, my mom in the car, she said, well, I kept telling my parents, like, I really wanted to study abroad. And she said, well, I heard that there's a school in Japan that if you go there, you can actually go for 4 years because they have an international program. You don't just have to go for a 1-year study abroad. I was like, then better. Why spend, 3 years in one place I don't like and 1 year abroad? I might as well just go for 4 years. And I really I didn't think twice about it. I just sent out the application and I heard that I was accepted.
At the last minute, I read.
Yeah, at the very last minute. Very last minute. That was, I kind of meiwaku and my whole family. I feel very bad for them. But anyway, I didn't realize at the time, I was only like 18, 19 around then, that I didn't realize that to make the payment, you have to make a wire transfer. And I didn't know anything about that. I thought you could just go to the bank and be like, hi, send money to Japan, please. And it would just happen like at the last minute, but that wasn't the case. So my whole family was trying to scramble to pay the tuition for me. Not the tuition, but the application.
Transfer, the application.
Yeah, just the application fee. And it was like the day of the deadline and they were able to do that. But anyway, I was accepted to the school and I was like, okay, I guess I'll just go to Japan. So and forgot to go home after that.
So I mean, yes, that was so that was in Tokyo itself.
Yeah, it was in Tokyo.
Yeah, and so you've always lived in Tokyo. One of my questions was, have you ever lived anywhere else besides Tokyo in Japan?
Actually, I have not. So my mother is Japanese, and she's actually originally from Tokyo. So my family that I was visiting growing up was in Tokyo. I've lived in 4 different places within Tokyo, but I've never lived outside of Tokyo.
I mean, are there any areas sort of outside of Tokyo that you would quite fancy to live? Or is it, I mean, because I've got friends who, they're perfectly happy in Tokyo because it's where it's happening. It's that kind of thing. I mean, maybe Osaka, maybe Kyoto, or even Kyoto. Some of them find it as a bit sort of slow.
I don't know. Like, I mean, even with traveling, I haven't spent too much time outside of Tokyo. I kind of feel like for me, if I had started off somewhere else, I probably would have been okay. But I feel like since I've been in Tokyo, it would be kind of hard for me to live outside of Tokyo, I think. Although I do like to go just for travel. I mean, I love onsen, so I love going to Hakone, but I don't think I would live there.
Yeah, that's a place that I've not yet been. I mean, I've been to an onsen. It was quite confusing. My girlfriend said, she dropped me off at this hotel and said, you need to go about 4 or 5 times. But what? And it was like 10 o'clock at night. 10 o'clock at night, and I was going to go to bed in an hour. How on earth am I going to go to the onsen 4 or 5 times? But I found out that you go, you wash, you get in, you come out, you do this, you do that. There's like various processes. So you don't go to the onsen, come out again, then go back in again, and then come out. So I figured it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, so this might be something you didn't know. My family is in the bathhouse business. So when I was growing up visiting Japan, I would always go to a sento every single day. So instead of just showering at home, I would just go to the nearby bathhouse. I just growing up being in the bathhouse, mindset. Going to an onsen would be like the extra cherry on top, like to go there instead to the natural hot springs. So yeah, I'm definitely a bath lover.
a bit. So how difficult? I mean, so you're living there in Japan, and what was your first job in Japan? And did it require fluent Japanese, or were you able to sort of get by with English?
Oh my goodness. So I was I have two older sisters, and I kind of feel like they might have been more exposed to Japanese growing up because they're very close in age, and my family was younger when they were growing up and taking care of them. So they did a lot more activities. They had more interaction in Japanese. For me, I was growing up just listening to people talk at me, but I wasn't really like speaking back. I found it very challenging to talk. I was more in like a listening mode. So when I came to Japan, I understood a lot of day-to-day conversation, but I wasn't really used to speaking. So when I got my first job, I was like, I could not learn from a textbook. When I was at school, I had a placement test. I was in Japanese 3, whatever that means, which means I know enough where I don't have to learn the basics, but I did not know any reading, writing, anything like that for kanji. So I was really, really slow trying to do tests, and my grades were just really bad, but I understood everything in the class, but I couldn't take the classes or the tests because I was just so slow trying to do the test. If you can only take half of the test, you're only going to get half of of a test score, right? So at most. So I was like, okay, this isn't working. So I wound up getting a job working in a cafe. It was a macrobiotic cafe. So it was an all natural, Japanese yin yang type of macrobiotic cafe. But it was more modernized. So the owner was Japanese, but she had lived in California for a bit. So they were really into like health trends.
And they could speak English.
They could actually, none of them could really speak any English. For me, it was like a juku, what they call. So it was like a school for learning Japanese. But the cafe was located in an area called Hiro. So there's a lot of international families that live there. So sometimes we had foreigners who were coming in. So they were kind of open to having someone who was speaking English so that I could help with the foreigners who were coming in.
Oh,
but otherwise, like everything was in Japanese. I remember making some mistakes. I remember one time our specials had just run out. So the chef said, "Hey, Katheryn, we don't have the special anymore. The special just changed for the day." And I was like, "Oh, do you want me to go change the specials on the blackboard that we had?" And instead of saying kokuban, which is blackboard, kokuban o naoshimasu ka, like kaki naoshimasu ka, instead of saying, "Would you like me to rewrite the blackboard?" Instead I said, "Would you like me to fix your pelvis?" Because instead of kokuban, I said kotsuban, which is pelvis.
Hey, his eyes lit up then.
I was like, "Oh, do you need help fixing your pelvis?" And she's looking at me like, "What are you talking about?" And I realized later that I said kotsuban instead of kokuban, which is very close. There was another issue where we had some cookies that were on the side of the counter. I was like, "Oh, what are these doing here?" And the woman said, "Oh, それは占いの." And I thought she said, "Those are fortune teller cookies," because uranai or uranaishi is fortune teller. But uru or uranai means like we're not going to sell them. So she said like, "Oh, we're not selling those cookies." But instead I thought she said that there's like a fortune teller is coming to buy cookies. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. So there's some lost in translation moments.
But it's got better now, presumably. So you're now able to sort of interact.
Believe it or not, I actually worked in a law firm as a for doing translation, and I was like, how did I get here? Because English law is really hard to understand. So I'm like, I don't know how I ended up here. But yeah, needless to say, my Japanese did improve vastly, luckily. So I've just been kind of learning as much as I needed during those times. Also, when I was working in the concierge, so I worked for a credit card concierge, they hired me because they needed English speakers, but then they realized they hadn't created the role yet after I joined. So they put me in with all the Japanese department, and I was like, oh God, I had to learn Keigo very fast because everything you do is on the phone. So you have to have like
honorific language.
Honorific language on the phone. You can't just look at the person and be like, I'm a foreigner. Like they have to know on the phone that you can understand them. So yeah, there was a lot of learning curves, but it all worked out.
So going from there, because I did notice one of your pet peeves about Japan was not being understood, or people misunderstand, thinking you're Japanese and expecting you, like we said, reading the air and not reading the air. Right. That's improved presumably, but are you able to sort of now get to the level of let's say soto as opposed to uchi, or suchi as opposed to, I can't remember which one is which, but yes, have you got in the in group, the out group? Are you able to now bridge the gap, kind of make Japanese friends?
Yeah, well, it's tough because I think when I first came to Japan, I was thankful that they could tell that I wasn't understanding, or I was having tough times communicating. So, you know, it was kind of nice when people would just automatically give you an English menu the second you walk into a restaurant, for example. But I think once you spent so much time putting in the effort to learn the language, also my understanding of the language has been from the native perspective. So growing up, just being around my mom is Japanese and hearing, your family members are speaking to you in Japanese. So I understood it, even though I wasn't really speaking as much. But when it got to the point where I was really learning it, and I was communicating, and I was actually talking to people in Japanese, and they were still looking at me like a foreigner and trying to say things in English, that got definitely really frustrating at some point. And I think it got to the point where I was able to accept it, that, my face doesn't look totally Japanese, so that's always going to be the case. But there's definitely been times where I've had conversations, or I've been speaking to people in Japanese, and they still choose to try to speak in English. And I think I have moments where it can be frustrated, but in general, I don't really expect them to look at me as Japanese. So, yeah.
I mean, where was it? I'm just looking at my questions.
I know we've kind of hopped all over the place.
Yes, I'm lost now. How to confuse an Englishman? But now you're quite established. You've set up your own business. Yeah, let's do two questions at once. Was it quite difficult to set up your own business in Tokyo?
Yeah.
That's the first question.
No, I didn't find it hard at all. So I do have a Japanese accountant. You actually have to have a certain amount of capital before you have to fully register for your business. So, which is like something that like an actual corporation, the amount the corporation would have. So it's actually been pretty easy to set up, as long as your accounting has been filed, then it's totally fine. I haven't found any issue with that. What was the other part of the question?
Right. Do you help exclusively foreigners looking to transition, or do you sometimes come across Japanese clients who are kind of like, for example, who have lived out in the sticks and have come to Tokyo for the first time? Does that happen, or does that not happen so far?
That's a good question. So in general, I've only been helping foreigners. So my website's in English. Everything I've been doing is in English. So I've only been attracting people in English. But I recently had a corporation contact me. It was a British man who's contacted me about doing something for their company, but it turns out that they want me to do something for their Japanese workers. So they're actually looking to have somebody talk to them about having a more of a global mindset, because they're looking to expand and have more foreigners work for the company. So they kind of want their Japanese company workers to understand the perspective of the foreigners who are going to start working for them. So it seems to start to evolve, but I haven't really marketed myself in Japanese. So for the time being, it's been mostly in English, but I think down the road, it would be nice to do things both in Japanese and English.
And that leads me on to the next question, which is now, when I was researching the questions, I came across the fact that you are the spokesperson for Lean in Japan Entrepreneurs. And this appears to be the expat branch of Lean in Japan, or Lean in Tokyo. From the pictures that I saw, that it was mostly, it didn't seem to be very many Japanese people in your group. But
we have 2 Japanese people that I can think of off the top of my head. But they're internationally minded, and everything is done in English. But that was actually started by another British woman. And just very recently, actually last month, she decided to lean out, as we say. So she's moving on. So yeah, I've taken over the group for now as a kind of a co-facilitator. So there's one other woman who I'm working with now. Yeah, so we've been running that, and it's basically a mastermind for women who are running businesses.
Could you just maybe explain to viewers? I mean, because it was the first time. I mean, I'm a bit out of the loop in that regarding that. I mean, I have Facebook on every day, but I didn't know anything about the woman who created the lean in phenomenon. But yes, could you explain a little bit about what lean in is?
Sure, of course. So there was a woman. She was basically, I think it was the CFO of Facebook. CFO, or yeah, she was basically on the one of the people who was running Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg. And she wrote a book called Lean In, which is about women in the workforce and how, you know, women kind of need to take more leadership instead of kind of waiting for people to give them opportunities, just to kind of, you know, take leadership opportunities. And even if you have to take care of kids, there's other ways that you can kind of manage both. And from that, there have been lean in groups or lean in chapters that have opened up throughout the world, mainly to help women who are with their careers. And the woman, her name is Jennifer Shinkai, who is a British woman who's married to a Japanese guy here. She started the Lean In chapter for career women here, but then she herself decided to become an entrepreneur, and she realized she needed some help in that area. So she decided to start a Lean In chapter before entrepreneurs. So just women who are supporting each other with starting their businesses. So that's a little bit about it in a nutshell.
Yeah. I mean, for those, you know, it was new to me. But within Japan itself, I mean, just getting a little slightly deeper here, there's obviously Abe's womenomics and that kind of thing. And it appears to be almost crumbs being given out by the Japanese government. You recently gave a talk to a newcomer class in a nursery in Roppongi.
Yes, I did.
All these mothers there. And it's not to say that it's not the case in the West also, but how difficult would you say it is for women to combine their work and career if they become mothers?
Well, do you mean as a foreigner or as a Japanese person, or either?
Either.
I
mean, have you?
I think it depends. I mean, it really depends on a few things. So, for example, I actually, when I first started my business, I took a bridge job. So a bridge job is basically where you have something part-time, so you have some part-time income while you're starting your business. And I worked for an international company in an accounting department because they only needed help just for the closing period for the previous months, and that's kind of when their workload increased, so they needed some help with that. And one of the women in the teams there, who was an accountant, she, instead of working from 9 to 6, she was working from 8 to 5, so just 1 hour earlier in her shift. And the reason why she was doing that is because she was a mother to a toddler. So she would come in an hour early after she dropped off her kid at the daycare. And then she would leave an hour early to go pick him up before 6 o'clock when the daycare would close. But in her case, I think it's really hard in Japan for women to get to get childcare. In her case, she was able to get a local daycare center to take care of her child. But in her case, she had the benefit of working for an international company that supports women
that
who
kind
are,
of the mindset. I mean, this is
if she was working for a Japanese company, I don't think she would have as much flexibility around that. I mean, she could get access to the daycare anyway, but in terms of having the flex time to go pick up her child. So the international company recognized that she's a new mother and gave her the ability to shift her work hours. So that worked for her. So I think if you have a company that is open to helping you in that way, then it's doable. And in her case, it was. And also, if you're able to find a daycare, you can. But on the other hand, so that's kind of the tough part about being a mom in Japan, is just trying to find a childcare and trying to have a company that can work with your flow of being a new mother. But on the flip side, in Japan, a lot of kids are more independent early on. So, once they're able to go to elementary school, I mean, I remember when I was growing up, the elementary school schedule crossed over with my summer vacation. So I actually went to a Japanese elementary school for several years during my personal summertime. So I was pretty much going to school all year round for like 5 years.
Kanji still didn't learn kanji.
Yeah, I still didn't learn kanji. They weren't quite up there, quite there. I was doing some calligraphy here and there, but I wasn't really learning about writing. But anyway, so we would just meet up. The kids would you just walk out of your house and they would congregate together and then meet up before school started, and they would walk together to school. And then afterwards I would just walk back home. So my my aunt, who was watching me at the time, she didn't have to be there. Like, I was just going to school and coming back on my own. So I think compared to living in the United States, where my mom had to chauffeur me to school, or I would take the bus, but she would still have to be around in the afternoon to chauffeur me to the next after school activity, I think it's actually kind of more challenging for women who have to really be taking their kid to and from places, even if the daycare or the after school care is available. Whereas here, like, once kids are independent, I mean, women can have their own lives, the kid could have their own life, their husband is having their own lives. So yeah, I think it's really just the first 5 or 6 years of the kids' lives where there has to be a bit more attention. And if women are not in the workforce during those years, then it's hard for them to kind of get back into the workforce after that. So,
is this something that you address with Thrive Tokyo? Is it a kind of the advice that you give? Is it?
Honestly, I find that is pretty challenging for me. So I'm not married. I don't have any kids. So I'm a millennial. So working millennial. So I'm still kind of not really into that mode in my own personal life. And a lot of the women I meet are trailing spouses. So I either meet people who are corporate workers who kind of don't really need as much help until a good 6 months have passed, because that's when they start to realize that they want to develop more of a day-to-day routine. Whereas I find that mothers, they want the day-to-day routine straight out the bat, so they straight out the gate. So they they kind of go through that honeymoon period of being in Japan for just only a week. And then they're like, okay, let's start, getting the groceries, getting the kid to school, everything day to day. So I wound up talking to a lot of mothers, and I find that they have a lot of help though from, international schools in terms of what to do for their children. But in terms of like what they need for their day-to-day life, they don't have as much support in that. And that's where I can't come in, but I do wind up talking to a lot of mothers. Yeah.
So so it's a possible future, branch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm helping them now. I think like when the conversation turns to like, where's the best place to get food for my child, like baby care food, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm actually not sure about that. But a lot of the schools do know the answers to those questions, like cooking for families, that type of thing. But it's definitely on my radar now. But at the end of the day, in terms of resources or day-to-day stuff, like in terms of information that people need for day-to-day living, it's the same, no matter like if they're just here for a year for studying, or if they're, a corporate worker, or if they're, stay-at-home mom. I find like the end point information they need is the same. So. Yeah.
So, and where would you? I'm going to make use of my background now. I'm going to have to make you. Where would you send people to get their best clothes?
Get the best clothes.
But I guess you can get them to eat properly. But let's see if I can get this running here. This is from my friend Tokyo Street View. Where are we? Playlist. Sorry, folks. I'm all right. Play. There we go. Anyway, where is this? And would you recommend this to your clients for getting their clothes?
Their clothes. Oh yeah, this is in Omotesando, one of my favorite areas. I actually live just across the street. I'm based in Omotesando, so that's
right. Oh, that's very handy.
Yeah. If they need clothes, that I get asked that question a lot too, because a lot of clothing in Japan is not really geared towards a Western body type. Also, the sizes are smaller too. So I think their largest size here is like the equivalent of a size small in the United States. So people have tough times finding it. But, with fast fashion, so H&M brands, Zara, even Forever 21, if people are open to the trendier fashions, they have more clothing sizes if people are looking for that. Also, Uniqlo is pretty good about sizes, and their structure is pretty fine too. But if you,
GU.
yeah.
I got this jacket from GU in Kyoto.
GU is fine. If you don't mind spending on international brands, like a little bit more, just more middle to higher end price points, then there's plenty of international brands that you can get too. I think the only challenge is if you're only looking at Japanese brands, then that's kind of when things become a little bit more limited. But yeah, there's plenty of places to shop. And also there's a woman who's she's a personal stylist. So even if you don't need personal styling in terms of like trying to like change out your clothes and that type of thing, and like trying to understand like how to coordinate, she can actually take you to all the places that have the styles that you need and the sizes that you're looking for in Japan, because it's harder to kind of pinpoint which stores are going to carry things that are going to work for your body type. So she can actually just go there beforehand, find all the things, and then she'll just take you to those stores and have you try on a bunch of stuff, and you can like get a full wardrobe too. So there's people who help with that. There's also actually one video I have on my YouTube channel is of a mega clothing swap.
That's
so
right.
This is a place, this is a place to go to if to exchange your clothes, like used clothing that's still in good condition, with other international people. So they have like plenty of brands and also sizes that are more geared towards body types that you know
Western
clothing. So I mean, of course, it's going to be for clothing exchange, so it's used clothing, but those are good places to go to as well. So
I mean, speaking of that, I mean, that's largely, though, appears to be, from what I saw in the video, largely women's clothing.
Actually, they don't have. They just recently started taking men's clothing, but because women are trying on and off clothes, they decided to make it women's only, just for the purpose of like taking their clothes off and trying things on like freely in the event. But they have been taking men's clothing as well. So some women will go and like search for stuff for their husbands or kids, you know, if they have teenage kids or something, they search for some clothing items there and they can take them. So they do have men's clothing as well. But for men, I would just say, you know, just the international brands they can shop for, or if they want to talk to the stylist as well, they can look into that.
Yeah, I mean, I had difficulty. It took us sort of several hours when I was there with some YouTube friends. I just wanted a pair of, I wanted a polo shirt and a pair of sneakers, and I dragged them around. I dragged them around Harajuku and Omotesando trying to find these.
I know. I have a nephew, and he's 16 now. But the last time he came, you know, I thought I was going to take him to Akihabara or something. He's like, "No, Aunt Katheryn, I'm into fashion now. You know, fashion wear is that." I was like, okay. So we were just hanging around Harajuku, and I've never been to so many men's clothing stores. But I was like, wow, they have a lot of men's clothing stores there too, like really trendy things. We were going to all the sneaker shops so you could check out the shoes and caps, you know, like not baseball caps, but just like caps that have like designs on them, and t-shirts and, you know, cool stuff. So I was like, oh yeah, they got a lot of stuff.
So you don't generally wander down Takashita Street much then.
Oh, there's plenty of items there as well, and they were all in his price point as well for you know, teenagers, so it was good. So pretty inexpensive.
I mean, when you get off the main street there, it's quite nice around the back there in Harajuku. Sort of very quiet. It can be very quiet as well. I mean, you go in Omotesando and there's crowds and crowds and crowds, and Takashita Street is like wall to wall.
I'm on a side where it is so quiet. Like you can, when you're sleeping, you can hear a pin drop, but you cross the street, chaos.
It's amazing. It's just the difference is amazing. Yeah.
I was talking about that with one of my friends in an interview on the YouTube channel. We were talking about how, you know, introverts, being an introvert versus an extrovert, and how
Mr. Eisenhower.
Yeah, exactly. And we were on just one back street where it was so quiet to do the interview. But if you had just walked one street over, you would have been like in the thick of all the craziness. So there's pockets of like little quiet zones.
That's what I like about Tokyo. I mean, you have the variety. I mean, you know, there are places there where it's super quiet, like you say, and you just one train stop further, it's total chaos.
That's
great. I mean, I like that, and you know, the gardens and stuff. I mean, besides Omotesando, then, are there any other places? I mean, Omotesando is your favorite place. I mean, you live there, and I've heard you say that it's your favorite place. But are there any other any close second in Tokyo? That
well, I used to live in Koenji, so I don't know if you've been to Koenji.
Yeah.
So Koenji is pretty cool. Koenji is pretty similar to, I would say, like a Shimokitazawa type of area. But yeah, Shimokitazawa and Koenji, those are great areas because they're so livable. Like they have the day-to-day stuff that you need, but they also have like the nice, bars and like vintage clothing shops and quirky, music and records and those types of places as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Let me think, what else? I also remember there was a time period where I liked going to Jiyugaoka. So it was kind of like every weekend. I mean, every day feels like a Sunday brunch day where you can kind of browse through shops and have some nice cafes. I wouldn't consider it to be a place to go to like for nightlife, but it just kind of feels like every day's a Sunday brunch day. So I'm into those kind of places. Daikanyama is really nice. One of the things about Omotesando, I guess I don't like in terms of living day to day is that since it's the kind of place that people go to for the weekends or for shopping, I mean, if I just want to go to a supermarket or, if I just want to go to get toiletries or if I just want to walk out in my pajamas to like a convenience stores, I can't really do that here. So
you turned completely Japanese.
Yeah, picking up or like going into a convenience store, I don't really feel comfortable doing that. I feel like I have to get dressed up to go out places here. But there isn't really like your kind of neighborhood, cozy, inexpensive cafe. Like everything's kind of a bit more trendy or high end. So I kind of miss that about Koenji. I felt like Koenji was just kind of more relaxed. You could do quirky stuff if you wanted to. If you wanted to be really relaxed, you could do so. Yeah, but more versatile.
This is not one of the questions, but I mean, is Omotesando living in somewhere like Omotesando, or even perhaps, for example, Roppongi? How good is that for your business? I mean, if you were living out in Shimokitazawa or Koenji, still would that still enable you to be connected in the same way? Do you think?
No, living in Minatoku has been really important for my business. A lot of people live mostly in, I would say the Roppongi Azabujuban area. And even people who maybe don't live in those areas, they work in the Minatoku area. So this has been very convenient. I've met people who live in Shimokitazawa or Koenji areas, but I feel like those are foreigners who have been living in Japan for a while and they're not really expats. Like maybe they came, kind of like how I did for university. They decided to start working. They wound up getting married and they're still kind of settled here. So I don't really consider those people to be the same as expats. Expats are kind of people who might not even have an interest in Japan, but they know they're going to be here for a few years. So they're really behind in terms of learning about the culture and learning about the language and that type of thing. So, and they're basically more in the Minatoku area. Yeah.
Yeah. So where all the sort of the business, main business is happening. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about that earlier because I saw the next question is whether you have Japanese clients, but yes, not yet.
Yes, been jumping around. Yeah. Give me 1 second while you're looking. I'm gonna just fill up my water.
Okay, no problem. I shall retop. I shall have another glass of wine.
Okay.
Okay.
Water?
I should really have water because I should be driving in an hour. But hello, hang on. Who's that? It's probably somebody saying the link doesn't work. Okay. The next question. Where? Right. Well, I'll jump to question 20 because I mean that's relevant now. For people, you're just talking about expats, the difference between expats and people who've lived there already for a few years. If somebody was coming to decide to live in Japan or Tokyo, not necessarily Tokyo specifically, what one piece of advice, sort of in a nutshell, could you give them?
I feel like it's really hard to just give one.
Yeah.
Have, like,
the most critical piece of advice from the words of Katheryn Gronauer. You heard it first.
I would say, first of all, I find when foreigners come here, they have a lot of questions, but they feel bad asking because you don't want to like exhaust, asking one person like a bunch of things, especially things that you feel like you should know how to do. Like things like having your college degree and then not knowing how to flush the toilet, like which is the button, like just like little things like that. Like
well, it's all in kanji and stuff.
Yeah, you're like and you're like, I don't want to ask anybody about this question, but just asking questions, like asking for help. It's not a third world country. You're gonna have every single possible thing. Don't be afraid to ask. And maybe have like some type of survival Japanese booklet with you, because there's not a lot of English help. So you're going to need to ask questions. You have to ask questions because there's no English help. But don't be afraid to ask those questions. And don't worry, Japan's going to have everything that you need. So
especially in Tokyo. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, Tokyo has like all the elements. So yeah.
So basically ask questions. And ask them if you can in Japanese.
Have like a survival Japanese if you can. Just don't be afraid to ask. I mean, if anything, if you're asking a Japanese person, like don't be afraid to ask like foreigners, especially. But if you are asking a Japanese person, I feel like they're more nervous about they're trying to get you the right answer. So they're and they're happy to do so, but they're just trying to make sure they communicate as well. But
they may even take you there.
They'll like take you directly there.
Hold your hand.
They go above and beyond. Yeah.
Now we're getting close to the end, and I have a burning question. A burning question. And it's the most important question of the show. And it's assuming your business is going successfully and you're making a ton of money. We shall go to this. Lamborghini or BMW? which will be your next car?
Oh yeah, well, the Lamborghini, obviously.
I don't know. You seem to quite enjoy the BMW. I mean,
yeah. So like, it's funny. So we were doing kind of a test shot. So apparently, Zach is gonna potentially have a client who might want to do some interviews in a car, and of course want to talk more about the car specs. So the one that we were doing was the BMW, which was awesome. But then they asked me like, what is your like car that you think is really cool? And I'm like, the Lamborghini. So for me, I would say Lamborghini, but no, BMW, awesome.
I mean, I can imagine though that you might see a few of those actually driving down the Motosando. So I mean, it's not uncommon. It's not unknown for for that to happen.
People who like to drive down the Motosando with a hot car, they make sure that they're known by revving their engine. So you have
all you have to do to get a ride is stand there and like put your thumb.
And I'm like, I wonder if they have the passenger seat available. Yeah.
So you've not actually been in? Have you actually been in a Lamborghini Gallardo?
I have not, but I would love for Uber or the Japanese taxi system. Like if they wanted me to pay a little extra to ride, take rides in the Lamborghini instead from point A to point B, I would be all over that. So they should have this car.
I mean, when you discover that's your next transition sort of workshop. How to get a Lamborghini for Uber.
I'm surprised that hasn't been like a Japanese thing yet, because Japan, you'd have like so many weird trends. Like if they want to have like hot sports car, Uber, sure,
I'd go for that. I'd go for that more than Mario Kart, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd do that. There's tons of like Mario Kart people out on the street too as well. So.
Yeah. There we are driving past in our Lamborghinis going,
Yeah, new trend. Sorry about that. You're behind.
Well, that was my last question, but I've got one more question. Before we go.
No problem.
Relating to me, are there sometimes any middle-aged male newcomers to Tokyo that your business could help? Or is
Yeah.
it mostly young women?
Well, that's actually a good question. When I first started my business as a health coach, I was only targeting women. And then I've actually had men who have been reading my book and who have been reaching out about the health stuff. But then actually, since I've been doing transition as well, I've been having quite a bit of men. It doesn't really matter for as far as gender or age or anything. If people are new to Japan, they need help, here I am. So yeah, I've helped people. I've helped some people who have been living in Japan even for a while. I've helped people who are, yeah, doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter the gender. People who have worked for embassies, multinational corporations. It's really all over the place. The type of people who've been coming for help. And it's interesting because the type of questions people ask, it really depends on what stage they're at their life, what they're looking for, what their interests are. I've been amazed. Like I'll have someone who's a college student ask totally different questions from someone who is a trailing spouse, who will ask totally different questions from someone who's just a corporate worker. And even this, though I'm talking about the same topic, I could just be talking about food, like grocery store or something. And they're each asking totally different questions because of their background and also where they're coming from. So yeah, it's been interesting. But yeah, can help. So
good.
Happy to help.
I'll give you a call when I get there.
Yes, of course. Okay. No problem.
For those of you, I mean, looking at the people in our audience, there are three people from Japan in the audience. If it's Tomo from Shikoku and Karina from Tokyo, and who else? Sean, not Sean, Shay from out in the sticks, Tochigi. And Daniel from Kyushu. So we've got them from all over. Yeah. So so if you need assistance and you feel like moving to Tokyo, guys, then seriously, yeah, we've got Katheryn's website is in the description, and once this is uploaded, I shall pop the link in at the end cards. So go and check out her website. And if you're not feeling particularly healthy and need to feel healthy, check out her book, which will yes, quick. There we go.
This actually, it's pretty interesting. I'm talking about more about seasonality and how Japanese people think about body care and body circulation. So hot baths, lymph massage and different types of things that they talk about for food. So yeah, if that interests you, and since you're in Japan and you have the resources here, then it's definitely worth checking out and making the most of your time here that you can. Well, yeah, you can learn about it. So.
Yes, I was quite surprised that yes, like you were saying in this interview with this woman whose name I can't remember, you were saying that keeping your body warm can sort of help with weight loss as well. I mean that I found quite interesting. Yeah. So for all those.
I remember I wrote an article. I write for a lot of different publications like Women's Health and Huffington Post and different things like that. I wrote an article that it got like 80,000 views because it was so controversial. I was telling people to, why the benefits of taking hot baths and of eating in seasonal foods and of trying to avoid drinking water with your meals, maybe having a little bit of tea afterwards, those types of things. And so people are like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever read, like we need things that are more science-based. But I'm like, no, like this is how people try to have their day-to-day here. And I have a client now, actually, she's already lost about 10 kilos. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more by now, but last time I checked, it's been 10 kilos. And one of the main things she's been doing is taking hot baths. Wow. Because part of it is that she's been adding bath salts, so it helps you with your body circulation. Mm-hmm. And she's been feeling so warm and relaxed that she's getting better sleep quality, which means her body's been going through better repair cycle, which means when she wakes up in the morning, she feels more refreshed. So she's not drinking things like coffee to perk her up, which means she's not having an energy drop in the afternoon, which means she's not having extra sugary foods and cravings. So it's creating its own virtuous circle just by doing one thing like taking hot baths.
Oh, that's me doomed. Then I've been living in this flat for 10 years, and it only has a shower.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. There's no hope for you, Simon.
Well, with that, I have to say we're going to have to wrap up.
Yes.
But I should like to thank you very much, Katheryn, for joining me and undergoing the grilling.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to everybody who's been listening. Yeah, I appreciate your time.
And I apologize for those people who I sent the link to. That Google just did something wrong, and I wasn't able to start the original Hangout, so I had to start a fresh one. But for all those who caught the notification, thank you for joining. Next week, somebody who is now currently in the audience will be joining us on the show, and that is Tai Nakamura from Flint, Michigan. I remembered this time. Musician. Some of you know him because he provides music for your videos. But he will be joining us, so look forward to that. And for now, I'd like to thank you for watching, and see you all again next week. Thank you, Katheryn. And
Yes,
goodbye, everybody. Bye. And where?